Hello, kiddos, and welcome back. We hope that you're doing really well and that you guys are hanging in there and you found some interesting, exciting, and intellectually stimulating activities, aka stop playing video games. Anyway, it's good to see y'all. We are bringing to you today SAT reading, public trust in the news, questions 11 through 21. We posted this last week, so hopefully you guys have already read it and tried to answer the questions on your own. This video is going to be Ms. Crowe and myself going over our answers to this. So let me say that again. You should have already read this and tried to answer the questions on your own. If you haven't, please, please, please go do that. Make your brain think first before you get the answers from us. As we go through this video, we're going to give you a little summary of the reading, and then we're going to go over the table that's there, and we'll explain our thinking for each one of the questions. As we go, I'm going to try and highlight what question we're on with my cursor so that if there's a specific question you want to see, you can jump in the video to when we're on that question. So the highlight looks like this. When we're on a question, I'll highlight it so you guys know where we are, and then you can jump in the video if you need to. That being said, Ms. Crowe, would you like to give us a summary?
Yeah, so our passage here is really about how the public has, over time, lost trust in the media because of the media's inherent bias and how they've kind of changed presenting the news to the public.
And then after we read all about that, you guys saw that there was a table here. The percentage of respondents seeing news stories as inaccurate or favoring one side, right? So the table is talking about the same things. It's going over a poll that was done in the years 85, 92, 2003, 2007, and 2011. And then it's talking about how people responded on questions about news organizations getting the facts straight, being biased, being independent, and the trends in that. So hopefully you guys looked at the trends and looked at the article before you start answering questions. And without further ado, let's start with question 11.
All right. So question 11 takes us back to the reading passage. So we're going to ignore that chart for a little bit. Question 11, the main purpose of the passage is to, and then we've got all of our answer choices there. If we're talking about main purpose, it's going to be like, what's the message? What is this really trying to tell me? Now, luckily for us, that comes really close to the summary that I just gave a moment ago. So I want to look for the answer that best matches my summary. The answer there would be B, discuss changes in the perception of the news media as a source of public knowledge. The public is changing their opinion over time. That word repeats in answer option B. And it's evaluating news media as a source of public knowledge. That's what the public is changing their opinion on. So our answer is B.
And I just wanted to point out for you guys really quick, one of the things you can think about with a question like this when it's talking about the main purpose, which answer is closest to the title? This is actually something Ms. Crowe pointed out when we were doing the draft of this video. And if you think about it, public trust in the news, that's like a good like test taking trick, right? So you guys are still taking the SAT this summer. Public trust in the news, public knowledge, perception of the news is basically a synonym for public trust. So make sure that you're looking for the one that's close to the title too, because titles are usually really good summaries.
Excellent point, Ms. MacLean.
And then we have number 12. According to the passage, which expectation do traditional authorities face now face? So there are several answer choices, and this is saying according to the passage as a whole. So what I'm going to try and do for you guys is tell you where I found this answer. So my answers, they should be uninfluenced, so not influenced by commercial considerations. They should be committed to bringing about positive social change. They should be respectful of the difference between public and private knowledge. They should be transparent about their beliefs. So we want to know which expectation do traditional authorities now face. So again, it's asking for change over time. From my reading, I'm remembering that they didn't really talk as much about being uninfluenced by commercial considerations. They didn't talk about like the money at all. They should be committed to bringing about positive social change. I don't remember them saying anything about that. They should be respectful of the difference between public and private knowledge. They did talk about that, so I'm going to go check that. I remember they talked about that up here. There's a new form of public knowledge, but I don't remember them saying that that changed at all, right? Like our understanding of public and private knowledge is still relatively similar. They didn't really talk about that change. What they did talk about over here when they're talking about the definition of authority, right? They're talking about traditional viewpoints and frames of view. And so I'm thinking the best answer is going to be that they should be more transparent about their beliefs and assumptions, right? People are wanting, what this article says is that people are wanting the news sources to not be the authority, to not tell them their opinion, just give them the news, right? Like flat, straight, raw. So the best answer for 12 is going to be D. I'll highlight it real quick so you guys can see it. Again, the best answer for 12 is going to be D. And then in 13, it asks where we found that. So which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Because we were thorough about the way we answered 12, here on 13, we can know that it's going to be around lines 33 through 38, because that's where we found the answer to the number 12. So the answer for 13 is going to be C.
All right, number 14, as used in line 24, common most nearly means A, numerous, B, familiar, C, widespread, or D, ordinary. Let's go up and look at line 24 just so we can find out this word and how it's used in that context, because that'll give us a better sense of our answer. All right. So our sentence here, which Ms. MacLean is highlighting for us, is generally accepted that public knowledge should be authoritative, but there is not always common agreement about what the public needs to know, who is best placed to relate and explain it, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So if I'm looking at, but there is not always common agreement, that tells me common is probably going to mean something like general, non-specific, out in the open, very broad. So let's go check our answers and see if there's something that kind of matches those. Okay. Numerous would probably come close because that is like a lot. However, if we're considering there's not a common connection, like line 24 said, probably not going to use that one because it doesn't make sense in that sentence. Okay. Same thing with B, familiar. It just doesn't make sense used in that context. However, when we get to C, this sounds a little bit more like what we were talking about, something that's very general, something that's very open. Okay. So does D, ordinary, something general. However, if we look back at that sentence and substitute those words in, just like we would with the math problem, we find that our answer is most likely going to be C. So that's the one we're going to choose here.
So C is the answer to 14. Beautiful. 15. The authors most likely include the extended quotations in line 43 through 53 to, we're either going to be, are they presenting a contradictory, so an opposing example? Are they citing representative opinions, so citing something that agrees with what they're saying? Criticize typical viewpoints, so criticize what other people might think. Suggest viable alternatives, so suggest different answers. Let's go up to line 43 to 53 and figure it out. So 43, 53, what I'm quickly going to realize is that that's this big hunk of quote, right? Mm-hmm. So what this quote is saying, this quote is basically talking about editors changing for the future, worrying about most read lists. The result of democratizing TV means that the public could be disengaged. People are reading the news differently. That's basically, the quote is just talking about the change that they've already described. Now, it's not really challenging that change, it's more describing it. What I'm really going to do is I'm going to back up a little, and I'm going to say, how do they introduce this quote? So they say, not surprisingly. So according to their argument, this is not surprising. Perhaps some news journalists feel uneasy about this renegotiations of the change in their authority. And then the quote goes on to describe change. So what I'm seeing is that this quote is a continued argument, right? So it's not going to be contradicting. I know that that's not going to be right. It's not going to necessarily be criticizing, right? Because it's continuing. And it doesn't look like it's suggesting any viable alternatives. It looks like the quote itself is just kind of complaining, which leaves me with B. So the answer to 15 is B, cite representative opinions. And I found that answer in line like 40, right? I found that answer a little bit before the actual quote.
So 16 is asking us, the authors indicate that the public is coming to believe that journalists' reports should avoid what. So our answers here: personal judgments about events reported, more information than is absolutely necessary, quotations from authorities on the subject matter, details that the subject of news reports wish to keep private. So let's back up a second and just look at these answers. There are some things that you definitely want to hear from the news, correct? Like, you want quotes from authorities on the subject matter. That just makes sense. So we got to throw out C. We're not trying to avoid those. We want to hear those. We also want to hear definite types of information. We don't really want to hear personal judgments. And we don't really need to know things that, you know, don't concern us. So we're left with A and D. Okay. If those details are already private, chances are we're not going to hear them anyway, right? So our answer here is going to be A, personal judgments about the events reported. If we look back at some of our earlier answers to specifically number 11 in our summary, like discuss changes in the perception of the news media's public source of knowledge, like we want the knowledge, we don't want the personal bias. So 16 is going to be A. 17 is going to ask us for a piece of evidence that supports that. Okay, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So we're going to do this a little bit differently than how Ms. MacLean chose her answer for a question like this previously. We're just going to go back up and check these lines. I mean, we figured out 16 from process of elimination, so now we have to do it the same way here. So let's check lines 12 through 16 first. Okay, so thus in contrast to personal or private knowledge, which is generally left to individuals, it's not really telling us a whole lot, right? No, it's just kind of stating what the difference is between personal or private knowledge. So we're gonna take that one out. We got lines 30 through 33. They embodied the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of authority as the power over or title to influence. Again, it's a definition. We're not learning anything. We're not supporting anything here. We're down to C then, so 40 through 42. This is the piece that Ms. MacLean pointed out in one of our last questions here just a moment ago. Not surprisingly, perhaps some news journalists feel uneasy about this renegotiation of their authority. I can kind of see this one staying in the running for a little bit. You know, a lot of people like to share their opinions, their personal judgments, blah, blah, blah. But we want to figure out why we're avoiding those things. So let's check our last one here, line 70 through 77. The growing feeling, as expressed by several of our focus group participants, that the news media should be informative rather than authoritative. The job of journalists should be to give the news as raw as it is without putting their slant on it. Just this one little piece that I read, without putting their slant on it, verifies our answer to number 16. So our answer for 17 is D, line 70 to 77.
As used in line 74, raw most nearly means. Now we might remember what line 74 said, but we're gonna go check it just to make sure. So let's think about our options. We're gonna have unfiltered, exposed, harsh, or inexperienced. So like we have those in our head. Line 74, let's see, where did they use the word raw? And I think we just read it in what we were talking about with Ms. Crowe for the last question. So give the news as raw as it is. The job of journalists should be to give the news as raw as it is without putting their slant on it. So that's that type of raw, right? We want the journalist to be giving us the news as bald-faced as it is, as plain as it is, as open as it is. Raw meaning uncooked, unfiltered, all sorts of good things. Hopefully, not like raw meat. Sorry, I've been watching Tiger King. All right. As used in line 74, raw most nearly means probably not exposed, right? like exposed could be true, but maybe they're not exposing things. They're just telling them to us. Probably not harsh, because that implies that they would be putting a spin on it, right? They would be changing their tone. Probably not inexperienced. No one wants an experienced journalist. So our answer is going to be A, unfiltered. In line 74, raw most nearly means unfiltered.
Number 19, we're moving on to that table, the chart there on the second page rather than the passage. Based on the table, in which year were people the most trusting of the news media? We know from the summary of the passage that people become less trusting as time has continued. So I'm going to start there. Okay. Looking at my answer options, 2007 is not an option, so I'm going to completely ignore that column. Okay. And if I'm looking at when people were most trusting, I'm going to look for higher numbers. Okay. Right? Lower numbers?
Yeah. Higher numbers in the response. You don't mean in the years.
Right. Okay. So let's look just at this first row here, getting the facts straight. So people want to know that the news is doing their job. They're getting the facts straight. So my highest number here is 1985 with 55%. Okay, and you can see clearly that number goes down as we move forward to 2011. Okay, now 1985 is one of my answer options. Let's just check another one just to be safe. Can you, yep, that's the last box I want. On political and social issues, news organizations deal fairly with all sides. I want to find a high number here because that means the news is reporting pretty evenly on all sides. Okay, and that high number again appears in 1985. So if I'm going for most trusting, I've got my year, 1985. And that is answer option A.
All right, number 20. You guys are troopers. We're doing great. Which statement is best supported by information presented in the table? So which statement, so which of these sayings is best supported? Which one do we agree with based on the table? I'm going to read the statements so that I have kind of all of them in my head, and then we'll go look at the table and compare. So between 1985 and 2011, the portion of inaccurate news stories rose dramatically. So they're saying over time, inaccurate stories rose. So that's one thing. Between 1992 and 2003, the proportion of people who believed that news organizations were biased almost doubled. So we want to see people believing their bias doubles between 92 and 2003. So we're going to have to check that carefully. Between 2003 and 2007, people's views of accuracy, independence, and fairness, so each one of those three boxes on the table, changed very little. 2003, 2007, we'll look at that. Between 2007 and 2011, people's perception that news organizations are accurate increased, but people's perception that they are fair diminished. So we'll look for a contrast between 2007 and 11. Let's start with A. The portion of inaccurate stories rose dramatically. Well, I'm going to look at the title to answer that. Percentage of respondents seeing news stories as inaccurate. So that's important because it's not saying the stories themselves are inaccurate. It's saying that people see them as inaccurate. There's nothing in this table that proves that they're actually inaccurate. So we're not going to look for that. So A is not it. We know that. B, between 1992 and 2003, the proportion of people who believed that organizations are biased doubled. Well, let's just say it. Which one says biased? Biased usually means that they're tending to favor one side. So we have 92 right here, 63. And we have 2003, which is only 66. That's not doubled. It's more, but it's not doubled. So not B. C, between 2003 and 2007, views on accuracy, independence, and fairness. So I would see this as like accuracy, independence, fairness in each one of those boxes. Changed very little. So 2003 to 2007, these are the two columns I'm looking at all the way down. 36, 39, 56, 53, that's the same. That's almost the same. Those all look pretty much similar to me, right? So that's very possibly it, but let's check D just to make sure. So between 2007 and 2011, people's perception that organizations are accurate increased. 2007 to 11, perceptions that they're accurate. That didn't increase, that dropped. So that's not true, right? I mean, it might have, they said that people had more inaccurate stories, right? So if we're reading this carefully, we know that D is not it. That makes our answer to number 20. That makes the answer to number 20 C. Between 2003 and 2007, their views changed very little.
Right, and our last question, the 2011 data in the table best serves as evidence of A, political disengagement by the majority, B, the professional claims of experts, C, skepticism towards the authority of elites. Let's just skip all those big words there. And D, excuse me, the supremacy of the clickstream. Okay, and they're pulling these answers from the passage themselves. So we're relating the table now, the 2011 column, to things we found previously in the reading. Okay, so let's look at the 2011 column of that table. Okay. I'm just going to summarize what I see here in this 2011 data. It doesn't look like people really think the news is getting the facts straight. They're more inaccurate than they are accurate, according to the people. They're often influenced by powerful people and organizations. I mean, that's a high number, 80%. And that they tend to favor one side. Now, to have a number like 80%, 77%, 66%, that's the majority. They're clearly engaging with this survey, so I got to take out answer option A. B, the professional claims of experts. Again, if we're looking at 80% of people saying they're often influenced by powerful people and organizations, you don't know that those are experts. So let's take out B for right now too. We'll bring it back in if we have to. C, skepticism towards the authority of expert elites. Okay. Skepticism is kind of like distrust. You don't necessarily believe what you're being told. You're still kind of listening to it. Okay. If we're talking about that type of distrust, that kind of skepticism, these numbers do kind of reflect that. I mean, people don't really believe the facts are being reported. Stories are often inaccurate. News sources are more influenced than they are independent, and they tend to favor one side. So let's leave C in there for right now. D, the supremacy of the clickstream, that's a little short of a fragment for us to look at. So that's from line 81 of our passage. And it says, the journalists we have quoted are resistant to the democratization of news, the supremacy of the clickstream, according to which editors raise or lower the profile of stories according to the number of readers clicking on them online. That has nothing to do with the survey at all. So we got to throw out D, which leaves us with C. That's the only thing we've kept in so far. So our answer here for 21 is C.
And for those of you guys who are word nerds and want to know what epistemological means, epistemology is the theory of knowledge and validity. So it's just saying, it's describing the way that we have credibility or trust for experts. That's what it's doing in this sentence. And you say it epistemological. And here's the thing, you don't need to know that word to answer the question, just like Ms. Crowe showed you. So whenever you see a big scary word like this, don't freak out. Just figure out what it means from the words around it, and you're gonna be okay.
And sometimes, like you saw, I literally just skipped that word altogether. Sometimes that works.
Yep.
As long as you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, so that was beautiful. We love doing these questions with you guys. As always, ask us questions if you have them. You can put them in the comments. You can hit us up on Remind, whatever you need. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to try and do a few more of these, hopefully, as the year goes on, so that you guys are still ready for your tests when they come up, hopefully this summer. We'll see what happens. As the district's mailing out packets, if you guys have questions, let us know. As always, we're here for you. We support you. We got you. Thanks for watching.